Everyone, this is Dawn. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make this card using the stamp set from the Happiest Place collection. We're going to use the Fireworks Burst, and then we're going to use the Sentiments by Melissa Esplin set, which is in the core catalog. So let's get started. We're going to do an emboss resist technique. So I have the Fireworks Burst stamp loaded onto my block, and I'm using the soft side of my Versamat to stamp on. And since I'm going to stamp off the edges, I've got some scratch paper behind my piece of white daisy cardstock. So I'm using the anti-static powder pouch on my paper before I start stamping, and then I'm just going to ink up my stamp with Versamark ink and random stamp this Fireworks Burst all over the white daisy cardstock. I know it's a little hard to see on camera, but once I use the embossing powder and then ink over it, then you'll see. So I'm just random stamping this Fireworks Burst, and then I'm going to sprinkle some Hero Arts clear sparkle powder on top of this. It's just a clear embossing powder that has a lot of sparkle in it. So what you're going to see is the white daisy cardstock through it, but it's going to have some sparkle over it on those Fireworks Bursts. So I just sprinkle the powder on, and then I tap it off, and I'm using a coffee filter to catch the excess so that I can filter it back into the jar. Okay, so now I'm gonna hold the piece with some tweezers because the heat from the heat tool can get very hot, and I'm just gonna heat it from below at first to start everything, and then I go from the top to get that embossing powder to melt. Okay, so now I'm going to bring in my Tim Holtz glass mat for my inking, and this time I'm going to use Distress Oxide ink, and this color is called Peacock Feathers, and I'm going to tape down the edges of my panel with some purple tape just to keep it from moving around. I'm going to be trimming this piece down so that it will have there will be a border around my card front. So I'm going to trim it down to 4 by 5 1/4. So I'm not too worried about those edges because I'll be trimming those off. So I'm just working my Oxide ink around with my sponge applicator. And you can put as little or as much ink as you want down. This ink, it's got an opacity to it so that when you layer it on top, it will cover rather than blend, if that makes sense. So you can make a thicker coating and it'll be a more intense color rather than blending into your cardstock. Okay, so I think I've got an even coating that I'm happy with. And then what I'm going to do is spritz it with water. This is just plain water. And when you spritz it or use water with the Oxide inks, an oxidation occurs, and what happens is the ink starts to pull away from the droplets of water. And so you kind of get more of a fireworks burst and spotted effect after you spritz water on it in those areas. It's kind of a cool effect. Okay, so now I'm going to bring in my Versamat just because I'm going to be doing some more stamping on black cardstock. And this is my sentiment. So I've hit my cardstock with some anti-static powder, and then I'm going to stamp the word congrats in Versamark ink. So I'll bring in another coffee filter and some gold detail embossing powder. And I'm going to sprinkle that on, tap off the excess, and then I'll funnel it back into the jar. And then I'm going to heat this up with the heat tool. And you'll see the powder start to melt, and it gets more bold, and it's like magic. I love using embossing powders. Okay, so I'm going to bring my burst mat back in, and I'm going to do the fireworks burst, and I'm going to emboss that in gold as well. Okay, so we'll heat this one up and get that powder melted. All right, so I'm going to take the glass mat out of the way and put my Versamark mat down and bring in my Big Shot. So I'm going to use this thin cut that comes with the Happiest Place set, and had to spin it around to find the correct placement of it, but once I did, it worked just fine. And then I'll tape it down with some purple tape so it doesn't move, and run it through my Big Shot and cut it out. And then the congrats sentiment off screen, I trimmed that down and then flagged one of the ends to make a banner out of it. Okay, so now let's start building our card. I brought in some gold foil paper. I wasn't sure if I wanted to mat my art panel with that, but then I ultimately decided on black cardstock just because it made it pop a little bit better. That Peacock Feathers ink color popped against the black, I thought, better than the gold. Now I'm going to trim that panel down so that I can have that black border. So I'm just trimming off the edges. And so that will be at 4 by 5 1/4. Okay. Now I'm going to bring in a microfiber cloth, and I'm just going to rub over the embossed bits to take off the ink that was on there. And it gives more of a resist, and it gets those white areas to pop better. Now let's build our card. I've got a A2 size card, and it's going to be a top fold landscape. So I'm going to just attach everything directly with glue, and then I'll pop my elements on the front of the card. So I'm just going to glue this down with the black border around it, and then I'll bring in some foam tape. Okay, I think I like the way that looks. So I'm using the regular 3D foam tape. Since I didn't pop any other elements, I can pop these with the thicker foam tape. And you can tear it, but I prefer to use scissors. Sometimes when you tear it, it stretches and gets uneven. So I like to use the scissors so I can get it down flat. Okay, and then the last step, of course I have to add extra bling, is some clear sparkles. Scatter a couple of those around. So that's my finished card. So I'll make a list of all these supplies with links, and you can purchase them in my online store, and the URL is in the upper right corner. And then I've made a second card using monochromatic coloring Bluebird with black soot oxide ink. And here's some pictures of that one right here. I appreciate you watching my video today. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And thanks for watching.